On today's episode of Horseplay Hobbies, we're going to be discussing and installing a driveshaft safety loop from BMR on our 2014 Mustang GT. This particular driveshaft safety loop will work on 2011 through 2017 Mustangs. So we chose BMR for a couple of reasons. They make really high quality parts. I trust them. I don't think that they're going to break or fail me when push comes to shove, especially with something like a driveshaft safety loop. If this is being put to the test, it means that your driveshaft has broken. Basically, this loop is going to mount to that bracket, and the driveshaft is going to be in the center of here. If the driveshaft breaks, it's going to be bouncing around in between that loop. So you want something nice and strong. There are two different mounts that BMR makes for the driveshaft safety loops on this type of Mustang. They have ones that mount forward in the car, and they have ones that mount more rearward in the car. This is the forward mounted one. This is going to be mounted in conjunction with the transmission mount. Most of the reason that I went with this forward mount is because I'm using a one-piece drive shaft, and I felt that this is a better choice for the one-piece drive shaft. If you still have a factory two-piece drive shaft, you could mount the rearward mount one and feel a little bit safer with that. Again, if you have a one-piece, go with this forward mounted one. As far as what you get with this forward mount drive shaft safety loop, you're going to get a bag of hardware, which we'll discuss in the installation video. You're going to get this main bracket, which is going to mount in conjunction with the transmission mount, and then the actual driveshaft safety loop itself. Everything looks like it's very heavy gauge steel, probably 1/4 inch. It's so heavy, in fact, that this weighs approximately 8.7 pounds. So I'm a little bit conscientious about the weight going into the car. Unfortunately, this is just one of those safety requirements at most racetracks, that if you're running slick tires or if you're running a certain ET, that this is going to be one of those things that they check for. I should also mention that this part comes in this glossy red, or they have more of what they consider to be a hammer tone finish, which is a little bit more subtle. I went with the red on this just because if there's a tech looking underneath the car, it's going to stand out a little bit easier. Oh, there's the red driveshaft safety loop. Hopefully they pass you on through. Next, we're going to dive on into this install. The first step, you want to get your jack underneath your transmission. I put a piece of 2x4 on it because the transmissions on these cars are made out of aluminum. So you want to be kind of delicate. The wood will act as a buffer. You just want to jack this up just till you see the transmission start to move ever so slightly. Right there, I saw it move. You're good to go right there. Next thing you want to do is take the two 15mm nuts off of the transmission cross member that's actually going to the transmission mount. After you get the two nuts out of the transmission mount, we're going to get the four 18mm bolts out of the four corners of the transmission cross member. Before you remove the fourth bolt holding in the transmission cross member, make sure that your jack is supporting the transmission. Make sure you're supporting the transmission cross member when you get that bolt out. Lower it down out of the way. Next step is we're actually going to semi-install the driveshaft loop itself. We're going to put this up around the driveshaft. In this case, we got the one-piece Ford Racing aluminum driveshaft. If you guys have a different one, the process is going to be the same. So just feed it up and rotate it 180 degrees and just kind of let it hang there. Like I said, we're just semi-installing that piece. So I want to show you guys what the assembly is going to look like out of the car. This is the transmission cross member. If you look here, there's an arrow that says front. That's going to go towards the engine side of the car. Okay. This bracket from BMR is going to go like that on top of the engine, or on top of the transmission cross member. So this is actually going to go in between the body of the car and the transmission cross member. This angular part is going to be going upwards. They supply new hardware. These are going to be the bolts coming up from the bottom through the transmission crossmember and into the body. So you have 4 of those with 4 washers. There's 4 smaller bolts. These eventually are going to drop through here and bolt into the drive shaft loop itself. There's washers and nuts and everything included to be able to do that later on. There's a couple other washers right here. I'm placing those into this location right there. That's going to go in between the transmission crossmember and the bolts for the transmission mount. Next, we're going to go underneath the car and we'll get this all bolted up. So get one of the transmission mount nuts started here to hold it in place. Next, you're going to get these new supplied bolts in each of the 4 corners of the transmission crossmember. So now at this point we got our BMR bracket underneath. Just want to get these hands started, make sure everything's aligned correctly before we go and really tighten them down. So once you got everything hand tight, there's a bit of adjustment in this BMR bracket. In my case, I'm pulling it all the way back towards the rear of the car because I want to give myself as much clearance in the front of the car. After that, if you can see here, we've got the drive shaft loop now just kind of mocked up here loosely. You're going to have some side-to-side motion here. The main thing you want to do is make sure the drive shaft loop isn't touching the drive shaft anywhere. So once you got everything snugged up, we're going to drop a couple bolts from the top coming through the drive shaft loop itself. So we're going to drop these bolts from the top down. Put the supplied washer and nut on from the bottom side. Do one on each side. Once I got one on each side, I'm going to tighten these down. Again, we're going to be checking for clearance. These bolts are 9/16, so I'm actually going to reach a wrench up, catch the bolt on the top like that, and tighten it from the bottom. After you have these 2 bolts more towards the engine side done, we're going to do the 2 bolts towards the rear of the car. I'm going to be honest, getting these bolts tight without moving this drive shaft safety loop is a real pain in the butt. There was a lot of off-screen swearing and took me several tries, so just be patient with it, you will get it. After you get the 2 snug down towards the engine side though, you're going to move to the ones in the back, and hopefully the drive shaft safety loop won't be able to move around at this point. In order to speed things up, I'm going to hit these with an electric impact gun. Just double check your clearance is even on both sides of the drive shaft and you're all done on that part. After you got these 4 bolts tightened up for your drive shaft safety loop, we're going to go back and torque down these 4 outer larger bolts that hold in the transmission crossmember. So it takes a 19mm socket and we're going to go to 85 foot-pounds. After you have all 4 of these 19mm bolts tightened, we're going to go ahead and remove that jack that's supporting the transmission. I take the jack out first. That way the transmission is going to be settled into this crossmember before we tighten these 2 bolts, or these 2 nuts rather, that actually hold the transmission mount. I have a little bit of blue Loctite on these. You don't need to go crazy tight. After you got that tight, just double check your work and you're all set underneath the car. Once you got everything tightened up, just check your clearance, make sure that the drive shaft safety loop's not going to be interfering, hitting the drive shaft or anything. After that, just get the car back down on the ground. If you guys have any questions on the installation of this or other parts from other videos, or if there's other things that you'd like to see, hit me up, send me a message. As always, stay tuned for more good content. Thanks for watching Horseplay Hobbies.